had a wonderful opening session with the keynote address of the Honorable Chairman. He has set the tone and the entire flavor for today's discussion. We will have Dr. Pushpinder Puniha, as was rightly mentioned, the captain of the NeAC team. And you know, when you have to make a maiden performance of anything, it is both a challenge and it's an opportunity. A challenge because you know पहली बार कर रहे हैं, और opportunity इसलिए है कि slate clean है, कहाँ कुछ लिखा नहीं गया, there are no biases and prejudices. So Puniha ji, over to you. And then after his brief presentation, friends, we have identified around 30 issues. We will initially request Kamlesh ji to make his brief opening remarks, and then we will straight go on to take up all the 30 issues, which, you know, I also want to inform that through the help of taxmen, you know, are going to be published as FAQs, you know, in the form of an e-book. And Nikita Ben will be very happy that courtesy AIFTP and taxmen, you know, this e-book will be probably, today there were 30,000. I think there'll be more than 300,000 people, I'm sure, who are going to be readers of this e-book. Please, Pushpinder ji.
Thank you, All India Federation of the Tax Practitioners, and the President Nikita Ben and Mukesh Bhai. It is wonderful opportunity for me to articulate on behalf of the department where we are headed and how we are going to hold hands with you in implementing a vision of the Honorable Prime Minister, which he articulated so clearly on 13th of August 2020. Chairman Modi Saab has very cogently and very clearly given us the outline and the framing of the scheme. And I would just be taking on from where he has left. He has given us the brief overview of it. I will take you first to the background of it in my presentation, and then we will have, of course, an interactive session where Kamlesh and I would be answering and learning from your experience. So let me first, before we understand anything new, I personally believe that one has to understand what are we going to do in this faceless scheme. What is that our goals are. And as Mukesh Bhai also pointed out, and as Chairman Saab repeatedly said, that our goal is threefold. And this goal, in fact, is so clearly written in the scheme that even the Income Tax Act carries these words under 143(3)(a). It is that you impart greater efficiency, you bring about enhanced transparency, and you hold officers accountable for your actions. And these three words I'm repeating, efficiency, transparency, and accountability, are not used as adjectives here. They are values here. And let me make a distinction. When I say they are not adjectives and they are values, let me say that normally what would we say? Say, Mukesh Bhai is a good man. When I say good man, I'm using good as an adjective. But there is a difference when I say Mukesh Bhai has goodness in him. When I say goodness in him, I am attributing a particular value to him. And what is that value? It's far more than mere adjective. It is that he's a considered man. He has very good demeanor. He takes rational decisions. He listens to people and then comes to a conclusion. So these are to be taken as values, these three goals. And then if we peel the layers, then what is efficiency? The first criteria of efficiency, if you read any social sciences literature, is that it is measurable. That my performance, your representation would be handled in such a fashion that we can measure the outcomes. And what are those outcomes going to be? These outcomes are going to be the best possible outcomes in the least wasteful manner. So that is the first value which the faceless scheme is trying to achieve. The second is transparency. And what does transparency mean? When you peel the layers of transparency, transparency comes across first that there is communication, there is mutual trust, and the decisions are based on rules that are considered inconsistent. So think about that also. We are to communicate, we are to build mutual trust, we are to take decisions that are based on principles and rules that are considered inconsistent. Then we are achieving transparency as a value. And the important thing, which the chairman Saab also emphasized, which Mukesh Bhai was time and again referring to, that how do we build in accountability? The accountability is among the most significant goal of this scheme. The scheme is devised in such a fashion that the person taking actions will be leaving auditable trail so that he is held personally as well as organizationally accountable for the decisions which he has taken. So I'm once again emphasizing that as and when we have to talk about faceless assessment, we have to think in terms of these three values, which have been very clearly laid out in the preamble of the scheme, as well as in the section in the Income Tax Act itself. And how do we achieve this goal? Now, achieving this goal, there are 4 fundamental methods by which we are doing it. And the first is, which Honorable Prime Minister was very keen on articulating in his address to all of us, is that you eliminate personal interface. Now, by eliminating personal interface, it is not that any aspersion is being cast on the conduct of the stakeholders. It is that personal interface brings in at times biases which can be eliminated when we act according to impersonal rules. So the first means is that we eliminate or we reduce, as far as the machines would permit us, the personal interface. The second thing, which again was coming out of Chairman Saab's articulation on the points that so many people would be involved in framing the assessment before it reaches you. So that is the concept of team-based assessment. Team-based assessment will ensure that the personal bias, at times even personal lack of knowledge, or my prejudice does not show in what would eventually be a group-based decision. So I would bring in the received wisdom, the received experiences of all the team members whose actions would be leaving an auditable trail, that why they have come to a decision X and how it was preferable to Y. The third element is that there is dynamic jurisdiction, and it is linked with the personal interface issue, that let this not be that I, at a particular area, build those kind of networks which help me or which hinder me. So what happens is that I put your case in an area or a place which you have no idea about, and the persons dealing with the case has no personal bias of any kind in taking decision. And the final element is functional specialization. Over the period, the group-based persons would bring in their knowledge, their experiential knowledge of their functional specialization. And this functional specialization from persons is built into organization by dividing the work into assessment unit, into verification unit, into technical unit. And we will be dealing with these in great detail in our discussions later on. So any particular new idea or a scheme has a basic foundational principles. And I thought Honorable Prime Minister was very clear in laying it out in his speech on 13th of August. He didn't talk just of the scheme, he talked as much on the taxpayers charter also. And in taxpayers charter, if you would read carefully, there is a very strong expectation of what a taxpayer or a professional would do. And the duties which are cast on that are one of the foundational principles of the success of the scheme, which is based on voluntary compliance. And voluntary compliance can come about only when the taxpayer as well as his counsel and advisor are first honest and compliant. They are informed of what is the latest law, what is the evolving judicial opinions on that. Third is they respond and pay in time. And then you come to accurate record and appraised representation. Appraised representation means that it has to be a participative representation from both sides, from the authorized representative also, as well as from the taxpayer also. This is something which is the basic core of this scheme, according to me, which is voluntary compliance. And voluntary compliance depends on perception of the taxpayers. Let's read these words. All these words are very significant and important, according to me. This is which comes from wherever good practices of tax administration have been developed, wherever the research has been done on what is good for taxpayers and what is good for revenue collection, is that voluntary compliance depends on perception of the taxpayers of potential capacity and capability of tax official to access the footprints and trails of his and her financial transactions. This is where the whole concept of the power comes into play, according to me. The taxpayer has to be conscious that now a capacity and capability exists where the tax official can access the footprint and the trails of the financial transactions which he has undertaken. This is the aspect which Chairman Saab was emphasizing when he was saying that we have expanded the scope of the 26AS, where we upfront tell to the taxpayers that what we already know about his financial transactions, what data we have already collected from the specified financial transactions which he has undertaken, what we already know by mapping of his financial data points with other regulatory agencies. And then it has to be with the increased capacity also. And the increased capacity is what? That now the department has that capacity to uniquely identify a taxpayer who has undertaken a particular transaction. The second aspect was, which again Mukesh Bhai and Chairman Saab mentioned, that the electronic filing of the tax returns and replies make sure that we can access and refer to those records at any time we feel like. And the third aspect is the digital functioning on the departmental software, that any action which the departmental official is taking is now captured on a digital software. So his actions are traceable backwards and forwards. Now let me just briefly say that what is the workflow of the scheme. The scheme basically involves that taxpayer will only have one faceless interface, and that is with the National E-Assessment Center, what is called the National E-Assessment Center. What is behind the National E-Assessment Center is the division of work according to functional specialization, where the assessment unit, which will not be located in the same city, which would not be known to anybody who's the assessment unit, because once you file your tax return, if it is picked up for scrutiny, it will be algorithmically assigned to a particular assessment unit in a different city. If the assessment unit is satisfied with the return which has been filed, and the red flags which have caused for the scrutiny can be settled there, then the assessment unit itself can go ahead and frame the assessment. And here I must repeat again what Chairman Saab emphasized, that out of the 58,000 cases which were assigned to us under the faceless assessment, more than 12,000 assessments have already been done, and most of them were finalized by the assessment unit itself when they mapped the red flags with the data and the replies filed by the assessee. In most of the cases, in fact, close to 95% of the cases, it was found that no further investigation is required, no further steps are required, and what has been complied by the assessee and responded is sufficient to frame an assessment. If some further verification is to be done, then the reference goes from the assessment unit to a verification unit, which is again through the National E-Assessment Center. And National E-Assessment Center also does not eyeball it. It is done again by an algorithm. So the verification unit will do any investigation which the facts of the case so warrant on the points which have been red flagged for taking the case up for scrutiny. The technical unit is like our backup office, where it is our aim is that we can settle most of the disputes which normally arise by getting inputs which are current, which are consistent, and which are followed right through the country. And review unit is our method of a team-based functioning, where when the assessment unit has proposed that what the assessee has replied is not sufficient, or his reply is not complete, or some addition is to be made in his return income, then the review unit looks at it, gives an opinion on that whether what the assessment unit is doing is correct or not. And if the review unit gives that no points being raised by the assessment unit are not correct, then the case under certain circumstances can be referred to a fresh assessment unit also. Can you please move on? Now, I'm just giving you a synoptic comparative analysis of what is currently being done and what the faceless assessment scheme envisages. The selection of case now is purely based on risk analysis, which is done on the basis of artificial intelligence and machine learning. No discretion is available with any officer in selection of the cases, which was previously with the department. Same way as if you will see the synoptic comparative analysis in terms of flow of processes and activities, it was manual and both system-based notices used to go to the persons. There was a permanent assignment of jurisdiction. There was an option of personal hearing and the multiple points of contact. All that has changed, and the flow of processes and activities, if you can see on the right hand of the slide, it gives that it is based on algorithm, it is dynamic, it is anonymized, and you have an option of hearing if you want through a video conferencing facility. Now, basically what we have done in the scheme, the way we have conceived, as Chairman Saab laid out, the Honorable Finance Minister in her budget speech in 2019 had given a roadmap to us. The roadmap was on these 5 points, and the faceless assessment scheme is along the roadmap which was given to us by the Honorable FN in her speech during the budget presentation in 2019. This is where the basic foundation, as I said, the initial foundational principle come from the great vision of our Honorable Prime Minister, where he said the taxation has to be transparent and you have to honor the honest. And then he laid out 5 particular points by which we can make the taxation to be transparent. And once again, the way the scheme has been conceived, as the chairman have laid out, it takes into account the roadmap of the Honorable Finance Minister so that the great vision of the Prime Minister can be fulfilled and the taxation becomes transparent and we keep honoring the honest taxpayer and we make decisions which are purely data driven. Before I end, let me share 2 or 3 anecdotes which I think are related with the way the scheme has been devised. Long years back, I was a departmental representative in the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal at Bangalore. And I had argued one case, which was, if I recollect correctly, it was on 115 JB when it was recently introduced. And my representation was before a very learned vice president of the tribunal. So our normal practice was that after the presentation is over, after the court work is over, the honorable vice president used to call me and my colleagues for a cup of coffee. So when we sat down for the coffee, he shared with me that, young man, you argued the case with great passion and all. How do you feel about it? I thought I'd done very well. I thought, sir, that I feel that I will get a decision in my favor. The words after that are something which really have stayed on with me. So the honorable vice president of the tribunal, who was a very learned man, told me that I can give you a draft decisions, 3 draft decisions. One is where I would set the matter back to the assessing officer. The other draft is where I will agree with your submissions and confirm what has been done by the department. And third is where the assessee's contention is acceptable. Try and find a fault in any of those 3 drafts. And he lived up to that challenge. He gave me those 3 drafts, and I tried my level best, and I could not find a single error in all those 3 decisions. The point to be taken from there is that even at the stage of the 3rd innings, like before the tribunal, if so much open discretion exists with the department that, one, you can accept what is the assessee's contention, 2, we follow what the department has said, and third, that no, it goes back for another innings, then it cannot be a good system. There has to be a degree of certainty about decision making. Otherwise, as the vision of the current government is, the ease of doing business will never come. The uncertainty of the tax assessment will always remain. And the Faceless Assessment Scheme is a very concerted attempt to end that uncertainty so that we can have consistent decision making, which can be anticipated by the and can be built into his financial decision making. The second anecdote which I want to share with you is that this comes from my experience in California when I was doing my public policy master's course. We were middle-level bureaucrats from 21 countries who were participating in that course. And they were from Japan, from England, from Italy, from a number of Asian countries, and I was there. What was very transparent that as you go along the development curve, and I thought that the Japanese were the most developed country, they represented the most developed country. As you went along the development curve, the decision making was more based on standard operating processes. And I had long discussion with those 2 gentlemen who were representing Japan in that course. And their thinking was very clear that 95%, practically 95% of their decision making is based on standard operating processes. In 5% of decisions, they will have some discretion, but the discretion will leave an auditable trail for later checking whether their decision was right, whether it was unbiased, whether it was consistent. So once again, in my mind, it was a very important learning lesson that if we got to progress, and the countries which have progressed are those where the decisions of the officers, decisions of the government are primarily guided by a very clear set of rules and laws. And if at all any deviation takes place from them, that deviation is kept as a permanent record which can be checked so that any bias or any kind of difference from those standard operating procedures can be noticed, and the officers would be required to give an explanation for that. So I would end at this at this stage with the hope that we will have a very interactive session up ahead. Thank you so much once again for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pushpinder ji. You deserve a big virtual applause from all of us, you know, for having made a great debut. I think the passion and spirit which we see in you actually instills the faith in the system, in the SOPs that are going to be launched. Because you may go technically wrong in some decisions, but at least, sir, with the kind of spirit and the open-mindedness that you have, I'm sure we will never be off course. So thank you very much. And before we move on now into the arena of questions, Kamlesh ji, I would like to welcome you here. You know, we have had, as was mentioned, the privilege of working together. In fact, for 4 years, you know, I was on the doorsteps of the North Block, in the CBDT, for almost close to 200 times. And it was such a great time that I had. I would request you to please give your opening remarks, and then we would like to move straight on, plunge into the questions.
Thank you, Mukesh bhai, and thank you to the Federation. It has really been a privilege to be here and learn from all of you and answer your questions. And before we move on to question answer session, Mukesh ji has invited me to share in brief my views on the initiative which has been announced by the Honorable Prime Minister about a month back. So I will most of the points have already been covered by Honorable Chairman Sir and our Principal CCIT NeAC. But I will just in brief cover the 3 points which have been discussed here. That is transparency, efficiency, and accountability. That how this scheme tries to ensure these 3 elements which have been announced by Honorable Prime Minister. So basically, most of the points may have already been covered, but I just try to put them together in a summary form. So when we say transparency, the first principle of transparency is the taxpayer should know that if I do this, this will happen. If I do this, this will happen. And that will happen to all taxpayers who have taken similar decisions. The decision across taxpayers should not vary just because one case is handled by one officer and another case is handled by another officer. So the transparency should ensure a uniform decision across taxpayers, across regions. And this faceless assessment will try to ensure that uniform decisions are taken across taxpayers. And then decisions will be rule-based. As Puniha sir just said, that there will be rules which will guide the officers that how to take a decision in particular case. There will be discretion. 95% cases will be done on the basis of SOPs, but still there would be some discretion, but that discretion will be well documented and there will be audit trail for that discretion, and that discretion has to be there, otherwise machine can perform that function. So idea is that it should be clear that even if the discretion is exercised, that discretion is exercised in a bona fide manner and not because I have a personal relationship with a particular person, and which is I'm calling bias. I'm not talking about corruption, I'm talking about bias. It's a very normal process that if I know a particular person and if his case comes up before me, that I might have a bias towards him. So that bias should not be there. So when we do assessment in a faceless manner, we should ensure that it should be free from all kind of biases and a uniform decision based on merit is taken across all taxpayers. And this is what this scheme is trying to ensure. And talking about transparency, another issue is also predictability. That is, on major issues, we should also know that what is the position which is going to be taken by the tax department. I think the next step, probably we will move towards that direction, that we will have a kind of a situation where there will be because we have technical team across 4 regions, and those technical teams probably would come out with some kind of a technical documents that in a particular case, in that legal position, what will be the view of the income tax department. So that would certainly be a very positive step for ensuring predictability. Now coming to efficiency, now that is also a very important aspect. There are multiple functions that are being performed by the assessing officer right now. He is in charge of pre-assessment work, he is in charge of assessment work, and then he's also in charge of post-assessment work in the form of demand collection, representation before tribunal, before high court. But so many functions that he needs to perform, one officer. The idea is, can we have a functional specialization where the assessment part is taken away and given to a faceless team, where because that faceless team is specialized in that kind of a function, the assessing officer, which is jurisdiction officer, can concentrate his efforts to pre-assessment work and post-assessment work, because those works are also equally important. Now, if a demand is to be collected, that is also a very important aspect of tax administration. So can we have specialized people working for demand collection, or can we have then a better representation before the tribunal or before the high court? So all these get functionally specialized people doing these functions. So that will bring more efficiency towards the tax administration. Another aspect which Prime Minister covered on his speech on 13th of August was that only 0.25% of cases are being scrutinized today. Now, what is the purpose of scrutiny assessment? The primary purpose of scrutiny assessment is not tax collection. It is not an end itself. It is only a means to achieve an end, and that end is that we should encourage voluntary compliance. So how do we encourage voluntary compliance? And that is where the honoring the honest also kicks in. That means, just let me illustrate with an example. If I am driving my car and then there is a traffic red light, I stop my car. But when I see my other colleagues also who are driving their vehicle, they are not stopping at red light. What message does it give to me? You know, I may also become one of them, jump red light, or I may feel frustrated that why no action is being taken against these people who are jumping red light. Now, exactly the same thing is here. Now, they are honest taxpayers. There's no doubt they are honest taxpayers who pay their tax honestly. They file their tax return properly. But if we are not able to give them a message that you are doing the right thing, because if there is someone who is not as honest as you, then we are able to pick up his case by artificial intelligence, use of artificial intelligence, use of machine learning, and we are able to do a good job in assessment in a faceless manner. Then we will be able to give a good message to the honest taxpayer, and also message to taxpayers who are not so honest, who are trying to jump the red light, that it is not right to jump the red light, and if you do that, we are going to catch you and we are going to take action against you. So if this message we can give to taxpayers, then our voluntary compliance would increase, and that is also one of the purpose of this change which has been brought about. And therefore, this will again increase efficiency in the functioning of the tax department. Accountability part was covered very well by both chairperson and Dr. Puniha sir. That is, first of all, once we have this rule-based system, use of technology, the functions of each member of the team well defined, there are less chances of mistakes happening. But yes, we are all human beings. There has to be some discretion. And once there is a discretion, one can always question that why this particular action happened in this manner. But because everything is being well recorded, there is an audit trail. One can always go through those audit trail to find out whether the discretion exercised by the assessing officer in the faceless team, was it bona fide or what is mala fide? Or did he deviate from the rule? Whatever SOP has been laid out or is going to be laid out, whether the officer deviated from that SOP. So all these are well documented. There is a good audit trail for that, and he can be hauled up if he is not following the SOP or if there is a mala fide intention. So there is an accountability, because this is a common question in the mind of stakeholders, that once you have a team-based system, how can you have an accountability? And just to respond to that, to give you an example, the advanced pricing agreement which was laid out here in India. So when I was working there, this was a common question that how do we ensure accountability, or how do we ensure that right decisions are taken? Now, advanced pricing agreement also is working on team-based concept. It is not an individual concept. So one officer is not responsible for concluding a case. There's a team of officers involved. The file goes right up to the board for taking approval for a particular decision. And once again, it is well documented. It is a teamwork, and that because of the teamwork, good results are coming. And so far, it started in 2013. And in 7 years, there have never been any complaint because it was ensured that decisions are taken uniformly across all taxpayers. If a particular position is taken with respect to a particular taxpayer, the same position must be taken with respect to other taxpayers if the facts are similar. So this has ensured that in a team-based system, we can achieve efficiency and we can be transparent and we can also be accountable. So with these words, I will hand over to Mukesh Bhai, and then probably we can start on question answer session. Thank you.